Hello, everybody. This is Kirsten Liegmann, and I'm the host of the Conscious Business Blueprint, where we're literally looking at the A to Z on how you can build and lead a conscious, values-driven, sustainable organization. This is really what is becoming the norm, and there is all kinds of evidence about that. And so we're really making the case that this is where you need to position yourself now so that you can be successful in what's coming in this 21st century economy. And so we've looked at all kinds of areas of business, from everything from leadership to culture change to sustainable supply chain management. And so I am really thrilled to have on today's guest, Elliot Hoffman, who I just, in our pre-interview conversation, told him he's been one of my heroes. When I did my MBA in sustainable management about 10 years ago, we heard, of course, all about the case studies, and Elliot's company was one of the case studies that we studied. And so the case study was Just Desserts, his company that he co-founded with his wife in San Francisco, in basically, I believe, is his own kitchen, making cheesecakes. And it grew to, one of the most trusted and respected brands in San Francisco with 300 employees. But more importantly, he and his company was one of those examples of how to be socially responsible and sustainably aware. And, he put solar panels on his building early on and proved that it was cost effective. So really one of the champions of the sustainability movement in the corporate sphere, and proving that it actually works. And today he is the co-founder of REV, which is a sustainability consultancy where he's training other business owners to implement all of these changes. And so really, Elliot, it is such an honor to have you here. I'm so thrilled.
Well, thanks, Kirsten. It's very sweet to be with you. So thank you.
So why don't you tell the audience what drives your passion?
What drives my passion is turning off the telephone.
What has motivated you to take this path?
Yeah. So I think it's a combination of things. I grew up in the Bronx in what was called the Co-op. And it was truly a community-minded cooperative that I grew up in. And my father he was very passionate about being a good community member. So I think, first of all, there's a deep sense of community in my own genes. And then growing up as a boomer in the late 60s, early 70s, going to college at NYU down in Greenwich Village in the late 60s, early 70s, was a kind of a life-changing experience. And ever since, I've had this deep passion and knowing, if you will, that humanity has just enormous potential for good and for positive change in the world. And that it's really our old mindset, our old business as usual thinking, that's the key obstacle. So I've been very much engaged in this movement with millions of others, the people you've already interviewed, who are share this passion and this knowing of what we're really capable of doing, and this is where we should be going and need to be going. Yeah. So
as you were, you started the Just Desserts in the 70s, was it?
1974, yeah.
So obviously that was probably really early on in this movement. So what were your key learnings about that time of growing from literally out of your kitchen into a larger organization and managing sustainability really in an environment that wasn't conducive to that at that time?
Well, that's an interesting point, Kirsten. So I'll start with the latter first, and that was the word sustainability was not even around at that time, as you know. So it was really, to be honest, it was more around a combination of being environmentally sound. The environmental movement had started in the early 60s, obviously way before, but, the first Earth Day was in 72. So it was a combination of being a participant in the environmental movement and as important, it really became a matter of why waste resources, whether that be energy for our ovens, heat, electricity, and so on. Why waste water? We did things like in the late 70s, we installed a heat recovery system that would draw the wasted heat from these large refrigeration compressors. It would draw that heat off and dump it into the water system to preheat water. And what that did is obviously reduced the amount of natural gas necessary to heat water, plus it increased the life of those compressors. So it was a simple thing that just made sense. It was taking waste and turning it into feed, if you will, for water. So it was just from both a business point of view and an environmental point of view, even back into the late 70s, it just made sense.
Yeah. What other key learnings did you have during that time as you were implementing these different things?
Well, I think, as I kind of said, it was about why waste resources? It just didn't make sense. And I'd say one of the other learnings was finding kindred spirits, both in San Francisco a bit, but even nationally, and that I wasn't alone. Because at times back in those days, you could feel alone when you did these things, when you had a different mindset than many people in business. As you know, it was and still is to some extent. It's about maximization of short-term profits at all costs. And for whatever reason, it just didn't make sense to me even back then. So finding people like, Gary Hirschberg and Jeffrey and Ben and Jerry and all those folks, that was a very powerful moment for me, fast forwarding to the late 80s and early 90s, knowing that I wasn't alone, that there were truly kindred spirits who had the very similar beliefs in how to run a business. And it all started, obviously, in the late 60s and has grown since.
Yeah. Well, this notion of community seems to weave through everything that you're doing, everything that I could read, and even your current work really focuses on communities. And so let's dive just a little bit deeper into that. What's the importance of having community, and how do you see them supporting?
So that's a really great point, Kirsten. As I've always been a community-minded person, even before getting into Social Venture Network and all the other movement players. I've always had a very deep passion for building a healthy community, and that meant in San Francisco and beyond. And it's also an early realization that there's so much that needed to be done. One cannot go it alone. Nobody, I don't care how large of an organization you have or what role you have in this world, it's too big. It cannot be done alone and should not be done alone. And that we need, as a community of the human species, we need to do this together, because what's the old expression? Either we hang together or we hang separately. And I've seen that in my own work, in my own life, that when you create something together with others, it's far more powerful. And this, even at Presidio, as you know, Presidio was really about community. So that when you go out there and do your work, Kirsten, you're not alone. You're doing this in conjunction with others in a variety of ways. And in our own work at REV, it really is about building community. When I designed this, I knew that no matter what the scale of the organization, it was important to be a member of a community in these communities that we call sustainability circles. They're really communities of businesses, organizations, cities, and people who are on this journey together. And as we've launched more of these, you can see the power of this. it's a combination of you have a deep sense of community, and that also triggers a sense of accountability to each other. You don't want to let your cohort, as you know, you don't want to let your cohort, you don't want to let your community members down. So you're going to do the work together. And we just launched a circle on Wednesday that was just, I'm so deeply inspired by the companies and people who are in this particular circle. And there are many other stories, but this one was, it's a small community of 9 organizations. Some are very large, like Oracle, and their chief sustainability officer is in the circle, along with the head building operator for the Intercontinental Hotels, and Cushman Wakefield. And these are all organizations that are on this journey, and yet they all wanted to come together to be part of this, to do something that they know will be more powerful done within a community than on their own. And it was just a stunning day and fabulous conversation. I wish we could talk about that one for an hour, but later. But the community is very powerful.
Yeah.
The obstacles that we face in this movement, as we've talked about, Kirsten, are quite large. There's the business as usual mindset is probably the largest obstacle that we have to really amassing and gaining movement towards this transformation that we talked about. And in order to break through this business as usual mindset, I think people at all levels in business, government, society need to see and understand that there is a very large movement that is building, that is part of this transformation. And it's about Jeffrey and his business, and it's about Oracle and their business, and Cushman Wakefield and REV. From all walks of life, people are getting on this path and recognizing that it is a journey, but there's going to be millions of people that are on this journey together.
Yeah.
So.
What do you see as the leverage points to making that shift?
Great question. Honestly, I believe in general that it's a combination of business. Business is the dominant institution on the planet today. Good, bad, or indifferent. That is the reality. So the more we can engage businesses of all sizes, from the very large to the very small, and to help them see and experience that there is a very compelling business case for this, I think that will help grow this movement massively. And I also believe, and many people are beginning to see, that it is not, the top down is not going to work, meaning it can't be only about the regulatory regime and what we mandate. It has to be from the ground level. It has to be citizens, it has to be businesses, communities that join together on this journey. So you do need the regulatory to set the guide rails, but the action, the real action is on the ground. And I've talked with state senators, people at the governor's office, and others who really do understand that the bottom up is what is going to make all this work.
Are you seeing the regulatory environment shift? I mean, obviously you in San Francisco, so that's a not a fair question when we're talking the whole country. But you know, like for instance, here in Colorado, there is a really strong movement right now to change the rain barrel in your garden laws so that we can start collecting our own rainwater so we can put it in the ground rather than having to, you know, pull it out of the faucets. And it's been a huge fight, and it's, you know, I mean, it looks like it's coming through, but it's like the regulatory environment is the slow moving glacial thing that is just not with the times. And so are you seeing any change there?
Well, actually, I am. And to be honest with you, Kirsten, it's really not so much about San Francisco. Yes, we all know San Francisco is progressive. But the larger piece here is California. And California, as most people know, is now the 7th largest economy in the world.
Amazing.
And I got to tell you, I think Jerry Brown, his team, the legislature, they really get this stuff. They really do get issues like climate change, sustainability at a very deep, visceral level. And we're just really fortunate to be in California. And again, a growing realization that it's a both and. You do need the regulatory stuff, and you need to inspire people and get people on this journey at the ground level. And when you're operating out of such a large economy, you really can have an impact. I mean, as I said to this group just the other day that I was just telling you about, the oracles and so on, I said to the group that I saw this little group of 10 companies or 9 companies. I said, we can be like the trim tab. Do you know what a trim tab is?
Yes, on ballots. No.
Well, it's on close.
Yeah.
Just think of a large ship. The ship has a rudder. Well, the trim tab is actually a small rudder that actually turns the larger rudder that turns the ship. So I said, let's think about our little group here as the trim tab, that if we can turn this rudder called the Bay Area, that can turn the larger rudder called California, that can turn the ship called the world, that's quite powerful.
Yeah.
So imagine lots of trim tabs in Colorado, in California, in New York, turning all these ships that eventually turn the whole world into a new direction.
Yeah.
And I think, again, as we've talked about, this movement is really growing. And at the same time, you're still going to have business as usual thinkers that are going to hold on to the bitter end, just like the dinosaurs got caught in the tar pits. You know.
Yeah, well, it was so fascinating. I interviewed Joel Mackauer of Green Business, and one of the things he said is companies are actually already doing a whole lot better, but they don't want to tell anybody because they're doing less bad, really. And so they don't want to even point out that, they were doing really bad, they're doing less bad, and that's bad publicity. So they don't even tell anybody that they're doing things. and that's really about expecting perfection from companies, and I think that's where I think the public needs to start shifting its perception a little bit, like, okay, let's support what is happening even if it's not perfect yet.
Exactly, and I totally agree with this. Joel and I having lunch after you and I are done.
Oh, are you?
So I completely agree. There are just like people, just like citizens. Nobody is perfect.
Yeah.
Everybody is on this journey, and it's no different for businesses.
Yeah.
And we do all need to move more quickly. We, again, as citizens, as companies, as communities, we need to move more quickly.
Yeah.
And as you know, we can't let perfection get in the way of progress.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
Let's backtrack a little bit to,
sure.
We're talking change, so it fits into the conversation, but at some point I read something about, how you needed to help your employees make a culture change within Just Desserts and behavior changes, right? And so I think that is something that a lot of companies are also facing. Let's say that, it seems like the CEO leader has to be on board in order for this, but then how do you actually bring it through the organization in a way that it becomes embodied rather than just another thing to do?
Well, that's a great conversation topic. And I'll keep it brief about Just Desserts, but you're absolutely right. It does need to start at the top at this kind of a movement, if you will. And when Gail and I started Just Desserts, we were both in our mid-20s. And we actually had a very interesting conversation at the very beginning. And we're both, children of the 60s. And the conversation was about the kind of culture that we wanted to create at Just Desserts. There were maybe 2 employees at the time. And we both were very conscious about what we wanted to create. And we literally said, let's create the kind of company that we would want to work at ourselves, which is kind of common sense. Why wouldn't you do that, right? So that's what we created at Just Desserts from the very beginning. You know, we were very open to all kinds of people, you know, men, women, gay, straight, black, white. It didn't matter. The criteria was, are you doing a good job and do you get along well with other people? If you did those 2 things, you were welcome. And there were some people that they couldn't do that, so they had to go. But that was creating a culture from the beginning, which, as you know, is actually far easier than changing a culture. So one of the things that we spend place a lot of focus on at these REV circles is exactly this issue. That it really, you know, doing your recycling and changing your light bulbs, those are good things to do. But that's just the very beginning. Yes. And we're very clear that what we're talking about is culture change. It's about changing the DNA of an organization. It's embedding all this into the organization. And as we do more of these circles, and especially over the past year, quite honestly, we hear more from our customers and people going to these circles, even the big companies. They're saying, you know, we know how to do the lights. We know how to do the HVAC. That's really the easy stuff. They said, what we really want you to help us with is how do we engage our employees and how do we change behavior? And that was music to our ears because that's really at a deeper level what we're about. And, you know, to be honest, there is no magic bullet on that, but there has to be, exactly as you said, Kirsten, there has to be a commitment at the top. And there are all kinds of ways that you can do these things, but it takes time. And I think the most important aspect of this kind of culture change is that it has to be authentic from the top layers of the organization. There has to be, this is an ongoing change of practice. You can't go in there and say, hi, our program for the year is changing our culture, right? There has to be ongoing communication. It has to be seen and felt as truly authentic because we can all tell when it's, you know, the flavor of the day. So, and I've seen this in different companies where when it's authentic, you can see how it will spread through the organization. You know, Bayer Pharmaceuticals right here in Berkeley. I'm sitting in Berkeley City Hall. Bayer Pharmaceuticals is the largest employer in Berkeley. And they went through one of our circles just recently. And they are deeply committed to this stuff. You can see it, you can feel it as you walk through their facilities here in Berkeley. From the facilities managers and engineers, they get this stuff. And others are beginning, but at least they're beginning.
So what were the steps that you watched? Were you, if you were, you know, privy to the whole process, obviously, but what steps did you see them take? What was sort of the unfolding of that culture change, and what did they do to make it happen?
Well, actually, Bayer, as you know, is a German company.
Yeah.
And Europe is further down the road. So in Bayer's case, we help them in a variety of ways, which actually, there's a longer story about this, but we talked to the lead sustainability person. I had a conversation just last night about this, about how thrilled they were to go through the circle. But the commitment to sustainability and climate really does filter through the entire organization because that's part of their culture for many years. For others, I need to think for a moment about, Webcor. Webcor is a major construction company headquartered in San Francisco. They're seen as probably one of the most sustainably oriented construction companies probably anywhere. And they have three of their people going through the current circle right now that just launched the other night. And there are two youngish women who are participating. And even though the senior people at this construction company really do get this stuff and they want to practice, we were just talking the other day about how many people who come to join the company in construction, how they love driving their big SUVs, and right? There's a construction mentality.
Right.
So and they brought it up, which was wonderful. They said to me, or to REV, we want to start providing fuel-efficient cars to our people who join. And that is going to be a very interesting transition, right? So you can visualize this. And so we just started that conversation. So I'm not going to tell you that it's done, but the awareness of the need for that change in this large construction company is very clear. And we will figure that out. And it won't be done in 1 year. But, if we look 5 years down the road, I'll bet you that their construction folks are going to be driving the most fuel-efficient vehicles that they can possibly find, given the needs of a construction company.
That's so cool. Do you have any other examples? I mean, I think this is really really useful for people to start thinking, what is it they need to think about by having these unusual things.
Yeah. I'll bring up another conversation with the same group, but different, and this was Cushman Wakefield, right?
Okay.
A large leasing company, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we were talking about the value of adding sustainability-oriented leasing elements to leases, right? For example, for the landlord, how do we engage property owners in embedding more energy-efficient lighting, windows, HVAC units that will both reduce their own costs and make it more comfortable for the tenants. And again, that it's not a simple matter. There's the issue of who pays the bills and so on. But again, it is definitely part of the conversation. And these ideas are going to be embedded into new leases. Again, I can't tell you exactly what they are, but again, what's important is that awareness is there, the consciousness is there, and there are going to be changes in leases in commercial properties all over the United States that will embed more of this kind of thinking into leases. Again, it's not a one-year program, but when we're sitting here talking about the successes over the past 5 years, I can almost guarantee you that companies like Cushman Wakefield and others are going to embed more and more of this stuff into the leases that they do with tenants and property owners.
Wow, very cool.
Yeah. Well, hopefully that kind of stuff will create a race to the top, right? You're a building owner, I'm a building owner, you have 100 offices you want to rent, I have the same. You're doing more of this stuff, I guarantee you. You're going to get more tenants coming to you. And they're going to be willing to pay an extra 25 cents a foot a month or whatever it is, so that you can have access to clean power, to more natural light, and so on.
Yeah. Well, and that's what came out of that, I think it was 2014 Nielsen Survey that showed that 67% of, this was a global survey, but still 67% of people were willing to pay more for socially responsible products and services.
Right.
So that is more the majority of people who are willing to do that.
Right. Right. Well, the question becomes, how much more?
Right.
But that will grow, even if we're only 5 or 10% today. It'll be a lot more tomorrow.
Yeah.
But as a matter of fact, my belief is that the choices that we're going to have in 5 and 10 years, there'll be a much broader choice of environmentally sound, resource efficient, regenerative products and services out there than there are today, with a lower differential between the old and the regenerative, if you will. That's my prediction.
One of the aspects that's coming into a lot of my conversations with the experts on the summit is this notion of our ability to think in systems must increase. And even just listening to you right in the beginning tell how you were thinking of your bakery and taking the heat waste,
right,
one thing, and making it a heating process for something else. That alone is a systems perspective.
right.
But that seems to be so devoid in so many places. And what are you seeing in that arena of people's capacity to start thinking more as a system?
Great. This is a great topic. You're asking great question, Kirsten. So one of the things, what I like to do, especially in Northern California, when we launch these circles, I love being with customers. So I generally do the first segment of the launch of every circle in Northern California, at least for now. And that the topic is called sustainable value. And one of the little things that I like to do is I share some of my own thoughts. And one of the thoughts that I share with every circle now is the idea that we need to move from ecosystem thinking to ecosystem thinking, which is exactly what you're talking about. And I clearly say we need to move from our thinking strictly about me and mine to a greater balance of we. It's not 100%, you don't give up yourself for everybody, but we need to start thinking about this, as you say, in systems thinking, in systems ways, about the whole ecosystem. And whenever I bring that and some of these other issues up, there is clearly an understanding. And I think part of it is that the people that you're talking with and all of us in this movement, my belief is that as we engage in these conversations more and more, and I think we ought to be framing some of these conversations in a way that we all kind of use, if you will, that will spread throughout the society. When Joel talks about it at Green Biz, when you talk about it, when I talk about it, when Jeffrey talks about it, in similar ways, I think as millions of people hear similar messages and similar frames, it will start to be embedded into our thinking, into our consciousness. It can't just be about me telling 10 companies at a time or 30 people at a time, right? It has to be you and everybody else that's part of this movement having these conversations.
Well, and what I find so fascinating when I talk about, these elegant designs, I mean, just take that little thing, taking heat waste and putting it, there's an elegance to it that for me personally evokes just a lot of like, oh yeah, that is so cool. And I think evoke that in people, like it doesn't make sense to build it this way, but if you think about it this way, Michael Braungart of Cradle to Cradle, he had example after example of how to do that, and was just oh yeah, that's the kind of society I want to live in. And I think if we can start showing people that kind of a possibility of how we can create elegant, efficient, cost-effective designs, I think that might, help propel this forward.
Absolutely. Actually, you bring up something else that I love to do at these circles. I have my own personal little toolkit. I'm a believer, kind of what you were just saying, that if we can offer people very simple and even minor examples of how we think about things and help people understand that all of our actions have consequences. So I use some very simple, and hopefully they're simply elegant examples of the craziness. So I can share one with you if you'd like.
Please.
Actually, I can share a number.
I'm sure you can.
So I just wrote a little blog. It's about a strange conversation that Gail and I had. We were camping a few years ago. And these little red stirrers that you find in hotels and restaurants to stir your coffee?
Oh, yeah. Yep.
So I wrote this, I literally show a little red stir at the beginning of these, when I launch these circles, I bring out the little red stir and I tell the story of the little red stir. So I said, well, think about this little red stir. I said, somebody pumps oil into a little factory that makes these stirs. And they put these stirs into a box of about 500, into a master carton. The master carton gets put onto a pallet. The pallet gets wrapped onto a truck, driven thousands of miles, unpacked, comes to your local hotel or restaurant. They put 50 of these into a cup. You pour your cream and sugar into your coffee. You take the stirrer and you stir it for maybe a second and you throw it away. Oh. And people get it. But nobody's a bad person for doing this, right? We just don't think about these things. I said, try next time putting your sugar and cream in first and then put the coffee in and it's stirred. I said, use a spoon. I said, use your finger. It's never that hot. And we had a hotel after he heard me tell this story at one of our circles. The next day, he had all the plastic and wooden stirs out, wow. Spoons in. And I've got more stories that are just like that. And I think these little, very concrete, everyday stories, when you point them out to people in a non-threatening, very simple way, it's like, wow, I never thought about that. And I think those little stories help us open our minds more and more to be more and more aware of all of our actions. And over time, right?
And that is where, you know, we were talking before we started this recording, that really ultimately it comes down to our awareness of our actions and
exactly
more conscious, which is why it's called the Conscious Business Blueprint. We've got to become aware of what we're doing and not just our habitual, oh yeah, it's here, so let's do it. It's like understanding the effects of everything we do.
Right.
Oh.
So I won't go into this other example, but there are many. And when you ask people, well, when you ask a business person or anybody, why do you do it this way? 90% of the time, the answer is, well, that's the way we've always done it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
So if you can disconnect that and say, okay, how about if you just didn't do that anymore? What would that be like? Or try it this way, right? You know, I always use the little red stir.
I love it.
Right? It's a very simple way to approach people in a very non-threatening way.
Love it.
And again, as you and I talked about before the interview, so much of this, there's such a compelling business case for this. One of the things I love to say at these circle launchings is, you know, as managers or whatever, people come to you and they say, would you like the good news first or the bad news first? I'm always one that, give me the bad news first so we can end on the good news, right?
Same here.
Most people seem to agree with that. So I say to people, I said, you know, the bad news is we're the most wasteful society on the planet. Nobody disagrees. The good news is we're the most wasteful society on the planet, right? In there lies enormous opportunity to reduce waste, which is money.
Yes.
And sometimes I ask people, raise your hand if you like wasting money. So much of what we're talking about, Kirsten, is really waste. Wasted energy, wasted material, wasted time, and so on. Well, if we reduce the waste of resources, you'd save money, and we're helping the planet at the same time.
Yeah. One of the things that just popped into my head, since you are working with these larger corporations.
One small ones too. We work with
small, right? Mid-sized, larger, you know, the whole gamut. I understand.
Right.
Is this notion of resilience. So obviously ecosystems, you know, they're resilient because they're diverse. But in terms of, you know, what we're facing as a globe right now, and I think there's very little discussion anymore, that we will be facing some pretty challenging times, likely from a climate perspective and from an ecosystem collapse perspective. I mean, there's some things coming down the pike that we as businesses must be aware of and prepare for. Does that ever come into these conversations that you're having with these companies?
Oh, absolutely. I'm sorry.
Sherwood Forest is going.
Yes,
Robin,
Sherwood Forest. We need more forests. I'm sorry. Could you repeat that?
Yes, it's about resilience.
Yes.
And yeah.
Yes. So absolutely. And again, a prime example is the circle that we just launched on Wednesday. Again, these were larger companies. They all get it. The guy from Oracle, their chief engineer for their Redwood City headquarters, really smart guy, engineer. We actually had also one of the other modules we do at our very first sessions is the title is Climate Change and the Business Interface. And we have somebody come in who really knows the science, and we have a conversation about how is this going to affect your business. So the person from Oracle said, his name is Chris. He said, not only do we know that we are going to face changes, but it's already happening. So at their headquarters in Redwood City, 8,000 employees, their garages are already sinking now. He said in 25 years, when I retire, they will be underwater. I missed you. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, there you go. Yeah. So in most of these, or I'd say in all of the companies that we work with, there's virtually no denial. People do understand what we're facing. The problem is, as you know, for many, it's just so big, what am I going to do?
Right.
And there's still, and this is not being critical, we are still stuck in this, it's got to make quote unquote business sense. There's got to be return. There's got to be a payback period that's reasonable. And that's still, there's truth to that, and it's an obstacle at the same time. And actually, I was just thinking about this last night. I was thinking about the West Antarctica challenge that we now have, right? And I was thinking, so who set the rule that you have to have a payback period of less than 3 years? Who set the rule that you've got to have this pay for itself in 7 years? These are man-made rules. When we're facing such large issues, what would happen if we said, okay, I'm going to make this investment, and I'm okay if it pays off in 10 or 15 or 20 years? Because that's the time frame. This is my belief. I could be totally wrong. There are certainly going to be those things that have an immediate payoff. There are things that we've worked with companies, there's been literally zero capital expenditures needed to save a lot of money because it's behavior change. I mean, I can give you some great examples. So there are going to be those items that we can save tremendous amounts of money on with no investment or little.
Give one example. I'm sure our audience would love that.
Yeah, and there are others that are going to take 10 or 20 years, right? So there's got to be a mix. So one of them was a little tortilla manufacturing company that we worked with in San Leandro. Been around for 3 or 4 generations, 80 employees, 100,000 square feet. The example is they made the tortillas, put them in plastic bags, about 2 inches of tortillas in plastic bags, put the 2 bags in the bottom of a master carton. Then they put this cardboard slip sheet over that first layer and then put another layer of tortillas on it and closed off the box. So as they started going through the circle, they had a green team that they created of about 8 people. So they're walking through the plant, seeing all this, and somebody asked a very simple question. Why do we need that cardboard slip sheet? And the answer really, as we were just talking about, was, well, that's the way we've always done it. The reality was that they had changed the formula for those tortillas probably 4 years before we showed up so that they would not stick. But nobody thought about removing the cardboard slip sheet. So they took out the cardboard slip sheet after they realized what was going on. And as we were talking about, that opened up their minds to, let's look at other things that we don't normally look at. So they took a close look at the food material waste that they were generating. So they calculated that they were sending 500,000 pounds of food waste to the hog farmers. So as part of their action plan, what's the key outcome of these circles, they committed, that was 3% of their food waste. They committed that in 5 years, they would reduce that from 3% of their food waste to 1%. In 3 years, they would move it from 3% to 2% of their food waste. In reality, that 3% was cut in half within 6 months. And that dropped $75,000 a year to the bottom line with no capital expenditure. The changes in I want to go back to the cardboard box for a moment because I passed on 2 important pieces. They took off the cardboard slip sheet, and then somebody said, well, there's 2 inches of space between the top of the tortillas and the top of the box. So they had the box manufacturers cut off those 2 inches of wasted cardboard. Mm-hmm. And then they realized that the cardboard box was built to hold 100 pounds of stuff. Mm-hmm. So 4 bags of tortillas weigh 15 pounds. Mm-hmm. So they thinned out the box. Mm-hmm. So just on the master carton, they removed the cardboard slip sheet, cut off 2 inches of cardboard from the box, and thinned out the cardboard. Those 3 things saved $95,000 per year to the bottom line for this little company, 0 capital expenditure. And then so go back to the food waste, right? So just these 2 things, changes to the cardboard master carton, reduction of food material waste by paying closer attention. Those 2 things required no capital expenditures and dropped $165,000 per year to the bottom line. So that's a wonderful example of,
no kidding,
it's behavior. Yeah. It's paying attention that can save you a lot of money. And yes, there are those things that you need to invest that have a 10-year, a 15 or 20-year payback. So there's a whole gamut.
So in completing this interview, what would you say to somebody brand new coming to you saying, tell me what am I needing to do? What I mean, obviously not the individual steps, but like what is it that what I need to do?
Yeah. Great. So this is not meant to be self-serving, so it's going to probably sound that way. I'll just say what we have found through REV in our own company, that this peer learning community is very powerful. I don't care how small or how large you are, you cannot go it alone. So I would say join a REV circle or any community of businesses, city, NGOs, educational institutions that you want to get together with and devote 6 months a year to working together to develop an action plan of 20, 30, 40 specific initiatives that are custom for your business, and lay out a plan. Create a 5-year plan that says, okay, here's the initiatives that we're going to implement in the first 6 months, 2 years, and 5 years. And include metrics. That's really important. What's the investment required? What's the return? What's the payback? How much water, how much energy, how many tons of GHGs am I going to reduce by doing these things? I mean, I'm telling you essentially what we do, but do it outside of REV, whatever. I encourage you to, to do it for us, because we really have figured out how to truly help companies do this. Awesome. It's very inspiring work here. So just like what you're doing.
Yay.
But join with others. That's really, I think that's critically important.
I agree. I completely wholeheartedly agree.
Yeah. And it's a long-term thing. It's not it's like when you go to a conference for a 3 or 4 day conference, you meet people, you have great conversations, you walk away feeling really high, you get back to your business on Monday morning, it's gone. Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's really why we designed this
Yeah.
with a consistency over time.
Yes.
You know, coming together a full day of a month for 6 months with a specific curriculum. It provides a structure, a community, and very specific results and outcomes that will save money and contribute to this movement in a significant way. So,
Very cool.
it is. I got to tell you, it's pretty cool stuff.
Yes. So I believe you have a gift for our audience.
Oh, yes. Yes, actually just are about to finish a white paper that is focused on how to engage people in your organization. And as we talked about in this conversation, engaging your people is really critical. And, you know, if people want to send us a quick note, you don't have to sign up for anything. Just send us a quick note. It's go to our webpage. It's revsustainability.com. And then click through.
Don't worry about it. We have a link in the email.
Great.
So just go find your link on the email and it'll take you right there.
Yeah.
Yeah, fabulous. Thank you so much. Thank
you.
Really,
Thank you, Kirsten.
What you're doing and just being such a bright shining star in this on this path. I think it's needed, and it's just to give these examples and to really move us the needle forward. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Kirsten. I look forward to meeting you in person one of these days.
Likewise.
Okay.
And to all of you, wherever you are in the world, I wish you a great rest of your day. Make sure you look at your email tomorrow for our next installment of the Conscious Business Blueprint, and we will see you tomorrow. Bye, everybody.